Those who have experienced life and death partings know how agonizing the feeling of being separated by death is. Generally speaking, even if one spouse passes away, the other will be immersed in grief. Not only will they often cherish the memory, but also it will be extremely difficult to emerge from the shadow for a long time. However, half a year after my death, my wife married her first love. At the wedding, she hugged that man tightly with tears in her eyes. My son even presented the nuptial cups himself and cried while calling the man dad. While my soul was floating in the air, watching people applaud for their love, despite my body not being cold yet. After being reborn, when facing her father coming to propose marriage, I resolutely refused. I passed away at the age of 78, having lived out my life naturally. In this life, although I was not as wealthy and noble as others, generally speaking, I was neither better nor worse off than many. For me, it was already sufficient. The funeral was extremely grand, and Jian went from door to door to announce the mourning. For 3 consecutive days, dozens of tables of continuous banquets were set up, and firecrackers crackled nonstop from dawn to dusk. During the banquet, Lao Wu muttered sourly to others, "Carpenter Lin really had a fulfilling life." I proudly showed off to him. "Hey, jealous, aren't you? This is fate." After saying that, I let out a long, contented sigh. In my life, wasn't it just a comfortable one? I had an educated and reasonable wife and a smart and sensible son. I drifted leisurely into the inner room and saw my old wife sitting by the bedside, tightly grasping a pendant in her hand. With her eyes downcast, she was murmuring something in her mouth. I walked forward and reached out to touch her hand, hoping to comfort her not to be too sad. In one's life, birth, aging, illness, and death are all common occurrences. Eventually, everyone has to leave. However, I clearly heard her muttering, "Why did you die only now?" I thought I had misheard and moved closer. Then I saw her suddenly throw the pendant hard on the ground, and a photo slipped out. It was a group photo of a young man and a young woman. "Why didn't you die earlier? Why did you have to stand in the middle of us?" I stared blankly at that photo, and the more I looked, the more familiar it seemed. A sense of foreboding welled up in my heart instantly. Just then, Jian pushed the door and came in. He saw the broken items on the ground, bent down to pick them up, and handed them to his mother. "Mom, don't be angry. Aren't things getting better day by day? Dad said he will come to marry you soon. In the future, our family will be together, which is better than anything." Humph, if it weren't for that old fogey, we would have been together long ago. Why did we have to be separated for most of our lives? Xie Shuyan pointed fiercely in the direction of my morning hall. Okay, don't be angry. If Dad knows you broke the love token, he will definitely scold me. He will say I made you angry again. Hearing this, how could I not understand? It turned out that Xie Shuyan had been secretly meeting her first love all along. Perhaps this son wasn't even mine. I flew into a rage and rushed forward, trying to grab Lin Yin's collar, shouting loudly, "Who are you calling Dad? Your father's body is not even cold yet, and you actually recognize someone else as your father? I worked hard for decades and treated you mother and son sincerely. Is this how you repay me? Lin Yin, Lin Yin." Ha ha ha. I naively thought this, Nian, meant studying, but it turned out to mean missing. "Xie Shuyan, you are really heartless. Although I, Lin Jian, don't have much ability, I have never treated you unfairly in my life. Why do you humiliate me like this?" I shouted hoarsely, but they never responded. Filled with grief and indignation, I wanted to smash my head to end this humiliating life. But then I suddenly remembered that I was already dead and could do nothing. I could only watch helplessly as that man came to marry Xie Shuyan. I watched her hold that man's hands tightly with tears in her eyes. Lin Yin presented the nuptial cups to them and looked at that man sincerely, saying, "Finally, I can call you Dad openly." The 3 of them hugged tightly, and the guests Aishar applauded and praised. Some even shed tears for this so-called eternal love. I angrily shouted to the sky, questioning God. "You, God, do you think my life was too comfortable and have to make me die with my eyes wide open?" As soon as I finished speaking, a bolt of lightning struck on a clear day, and I blacked out. When I opened my eyes again, it was the time when Xie Shuyan's father came to propose marriage. Looking at the scene in front of me, the memories of the previous life came flooding back. My father was a well-known carpenter in the surrounding areas, and I followed him to work everywhere since I was a child. In that era, having a craft was quite popular. So when I was 20 years old, matchmakers almost wore out the threshold of our house. But my father always said I was too young and that it was not too late to talk about marriage in a few years. Now that I think about it, he probably couldn't bear to lose me as a free laborer. It was not until I was 28 years old that rumors started to spread in the village, and my father finally agreed to the matchmaker's words. But by then, most of the eligible girls in the nearby villages had already married. I thought I would be a bachelor for life. But one day, teacher Xie from the village primary school came to my door. He said he felt sorry for his daughter and had always been reluctant to let her marry early. With this delay, his daughter had become older, and now he was in a hurry. At that time, I was overjoyed. Xie Shuyun was a well-known talented woman. Just by hearing her name, one could tell she was different from us common folks. I never dared to hope to marry her. My father was also very happy after all. In those days, teachers were quite respected, so the two sides discussed, and we got married at the end of the year. Soon after marriage, Xie Shuyun became pregnant after the new year, but the child was born prematurely in July. For this reason, I have always felt extremely guilty, hating myself for not having the ability to provide them with good food and a good life to nourish their bodies. I knew that Xie Shuyun always looked down on me, thinking I was mediocre and unambitious. But I was just an ordinary person with no great ability, so I could only treat her doubly well. After getting married, I never let her do a day of housework, let alone work in the fields planting rice seedlings. I always felt that she was wrong by being with me. Also knew that the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law was difficult, so I always tried my best to mediate. But even so, my mother was still very angry about it later. I gritted my teeth and directly proposed to my father to separate the family. My father flew into a rage, beat me up, and scolded me for being ungrateful and rebellious. He also said that he would no longer consider me his son. Then, I was left with only a stove and 2 pieces of coal and was separated from the family. The beginning days were really tough. I borrowed money from relatives and friends everywhere. With great difficulty, I scraped together 2,000 yuan and built a small brick house after that. I worked like crazy to pay off the debt. But every time I returned home and saw my wife and son, I felt that no matter how tired I was, it was worth it. But now that I think about it, that son might not be mine at all. In my life, I actually wore a cuckold for so long it's really extremely ridiculous. I rubbed my face, stood up, and said to my future father-in-law, "Teacher Xie, I think it's better to forget it. I'm not good enough for your daughter." Before he could react, my father raised his hand and slapped me hard on the head. "What nonsense are you talking about? Get out of here. You have no right to speak here." My father has always been domineering and dictatorial. Once he decides something, no one can change it. Sure enough, he quickly reached an agreement with Teacher Xie and set the date for me to propose marriage. He completely ignored my opposition and forcefully dragged me to Xie Shuyun's home. My future father-in-law greeted us cordially and let us in, while my future mother-in-law gave me a thorough once-over. She then pulled Xie Shuyun into the inner room, the undisguised disdain, which I failed to notice at all in my previous life. Seeing the 2 elders chatting animatedly in the main hall, I made an excuse to use the toilet, secretly passed by the inner room, and slowed down my steps. Then I heard the impatient voice of my future mother-in-law. "All you do is cry. Why didn't you cry when you did that shameful thing?" Xie Shuyun's voice was too soft to hear clearly. Then I heard my future mother-in-law comforting her. "All right, just listen to your father. I can tell that stupid boy definitely likes you. Arrange it quickly. You can find an excuse later. If you delay any longer, your pregnancy will be obvious." Hearing these words, my eyes instantly turned red. So they had known about Xie Shuyun's scandal from the very beginning. How could this so-called scholarly family be so shameless? I was filled with rage and kicked the door open, roaring, "Well, you shameless hussy. You're carrying someone else's bastard and still want me to be the fall guy." The 2 people in the room were stunned by my sudden action and stood there dumbfounded. The 2 people in the main hall rushed over immediately when they heard the commotion. I shouted even louder, "You want to cuckold me? No way." Only then did my future mother-in-law react and nervously tried to grab my hand. "No, Shaolin, listen to me first." My father's face turned ashen. He pushed me aside and walked out the door. I quickly followed. I thought my marriage to Xie Shuyun was over for good, and we would go our separate ways with no more intersection. But unexpectedly, one evening, Xie Shuyun stopped me on my way home. "Jian, for the sake of our once being classmates, have pity on me." She looked at me with tearful eyes, truly presenting a pitiful appearance. Unfortunately, my heart had already been torn to pieces by her. "We were classmates for just 1 semester. What kind of classmates were we? Isn't Zhu better? His wife was divorced because she couldn't have children. Wouldn't it be just right for you to marry him?" Hearing my malicious words, she turned around and ran away crying. Xie Shuyun had always been arrogant. When had she ever been so humble to me? It seems that she really went to great lengths to find a father for the bastard in her belly. I kicked the pebbles under my feet and walked home. These days, the atmosphere at home has been extremely oppressive. Father was smashing bowls and chopsticks at home, and mother was scolding in the main hall, but all these had nothing to do with me. Felt extremely pleased. Rumors also started to spread in the village. The Lin and Xie families, who were supposed to become in-laws, had no news about the marriage. Some nosy neighbors came to inquire, but were all driven out by my father. Mother complained that father didn't make proper inquiries in advance and was still concerned about other people's faces even now. But seeing father's bad temper, she dared not complain anymore. 2 days later, Teacher Xie came to our house again. I don't know what they talked about. After father sent the guest away politely, he turned around and told me to get ready. I was to marry Xie Shuyun on the 6th day of the 12th lunar month. Mother jumped up in opposition. "No way. How can such a shameless woman enter our house?" Father slapped the table. "What do you know? In 2 years, old Xie will return to the city. He promised to take us with him, then we'll be city people." All right, that's settled. Only then did I realize that father had been waiting for this. He had been longing to become a city person. Not to mention that Teacher Xie had been an educated youth in our village for 20 years. If he really had the ability, why didn't he go back earlier? What's more, we all knew about their family scandal. How could he dare to keep this time bomb that could explode at any time by his side? So stupid and unaware of it, I disdainfully rolled my eyes. I won't marry her if you want to. You marry her. Anyway, you don't like mother, why don't you divorce her and marry a well-educated new wife? Wouldn't that be perfect? Shouts and curses from my parents came from behind, but I didn't look back these days. I had already made inquiries. Uncle Chi was going to form a work team to take on jobs in the city. In my previous life, he also came to meet that time. I had just gotten married, so I refused later. His projects grew bigger and bigger, and he became one of the first people in the village to get rich, causing envy and regret among many. I once told this story as a joke to Xie Shuyan to show my unwavering love for her, but she despised me as being mediocre and unambitious. This time, I directly found Uncle Chi and signed on. When I got home, I started packing my luggage and informed my parents that I was going on a long journey. Father was furious when he heard this. Who allowed you to go? Are you getting too big for your boots now? You don't even listen to your father anymore. Who will be my helper if you leave? Mother also complained beside him. Old Chi is not a decent person. Go and cancel it quickly. Have you been treated poorly at home these years while working with your father? True, working with father ensured food and shelter, but that was Ali had no money at all in my hands. Which young person was as shabby as me? Seeing that I wouldn't budge, father threw down the chopsticks. Fine, if you want to go, go. If you dare to step out of this door today, I'll pretend I never had a son like you. Looking at my furious father, I knew it was useless to reason with him. So I picked up my luggage and walked out the door. I really don't understand. I am clearly father's only son, but he always looks at me with disfavor. He either beats or scolds me on weekdays. I never heard a kind word from him, and he never allows me to question anything he does. Such a father is not worth having. Without even waiting for the new year, I followed Uncle Chi to a construction site in Jian. I worked during the day and strolled around at night. Everything in the big city was full of novelty, completely different from the remote village. Only now did I suddenly realize that in my previous life, I seemed to have really missed out on so many wonderful things. Mother had sent me messages several times through others, asking me to go home and apologize to father, but I never paid any attention. However, I still set aside a part of my earnings and asked someone to send it home on the way anyway. Mother cared about me in her heart. It's just that she was unlucky to meet a man as domineering and stubborn as father. When Qingming festival arrived, I followed Uncle Chi back to the village to worship our ancestors. Uncle Chi was wealthy and bought a whole cart of firecrackers. This act caused quite a stir in the village. I secretly sneaked back home, thinking that since I sent money back every month, father couldn't be so angry as to not even let me visit the ancestral grave, could he? When I got home, I saw an unexpected person. Xie Shuyan was sitting by the patio, rubbing a large basin of clothes vigorously. Mother rushed out immediately when she heard the door open. She took my hand and looked me up and down carefully, murmuring, "My son has had a hard time outside." Father just sat on the chair in the main hall, glanced at me, snorted, and said nothing. I looked at Xie Shuyan with some confusion, really not understanding what the situation was now. Mother pulled me to sit down and started chatting nonstop. It turned out that after I left home, my parents still married Xie Shuyan into our family. However, they claimed to the outside world that I had gone out to make a fortune, and the money I sent back on time every month just verified this claim. But in this life, Xie Shuyan didn't enjoy the good treatment as in the previous life. Mother had never liked her, so she assigned her all kinds of arduous tasks. Washing clothes and cooking were just the basics. Whenever Xie Shuyan showed the slightest reluctance, Mother would threaten to send her back to the Xie family. Xie Shuyan might have gone back to complain to teacher Xie, but she finally returned with red eyes. Before long, teacher Xie left for the city with his wife, even earlier than in the previous life. Since things had come to this, I had no way to drive her out anymore at night. I directly made a makeshift bed on the ground. Truly unwilling to have any intimate contact with her in the middle of the night, I suddenly felt a soft body press against me from behind. Her hands also moved restlessly on me. Suddenly grabbed her hand, sat up, and said coldly, "You don't have to do this." But she put on a pitiful look and said, "Jian, I'm already your wife. Just give me a chance, I'll serve you well in the future." I looked at her slightly swollen abdomen with disgust and sneered. "Then why don't you abort the bastard in your belly? Still thinking about your old lover?" Xie Shiyun's face instantly turned deathly pale, and her lips murmured, "This, after all, it's a life." I snorted and threw her hand away. If I continued talking to her, I really worried that I couldn't help but hit her. I got up and walked outside, looking at the bright moon in the sky. Tears involuntarily streamed down. In my previous life, I respected and adored her so much. To be able to marry such a talented and beautiful woman, I felt both inferior and excited. I wished I could give her my whole heart. She said she didn't like the physical intimacy between husband and wife, so I endured my desires and found ways to deal with them myself, for fear of defiling her. But I never expected that the only time we had sex was also her elaborate scheme, and now she took the initiative to seduce me. Yes, how could a woman who dared to get pregnant before marriage be the unattainable goddess I once imagined? I just couldn't figure out how much she loved that man. Even though she was harassed by my mother and despised by me, she still refused to abort the child in her belly. After visiting the graves, I left the village and returned to Jianqing. After returning to the city, I worked even harder. As long as there was an opportunity to make money, I would never let it go. The people in the team always joked with me, "Jian, you have to work hard to make money. Your wife is so beautiful. If you don't work hard, she might leave you." Another person who also came from the village joined in the Qiang. "She won't leave, can't you see? This guy Jian is really something. He made his wife pregnant so quickly. Everyone burst into laughter, but I just remained silent. I worked so hard to make money, not for Xieshuyan. Since God gave me a chance to be reborn, how could I waste this precious opportunity? I must achieve something and completely change my previous life's worthlessness. Later, I collected toothpaste tubes for a while with some friends I met while wandering around. During this process, I discovered that there were treasures in the garbage dumps. So, I left Uncle Chi's construction team and used the only 200 yuan in my hand to open a waste recycling station. I bought waste items such as cardboard and iron from scavengers at a low price and then resold them to factories at a high price. Unexpectedly, in just half a year, I earned 6,000 yuan. This was wealth that I could never have imagined in my previous life. In the past, when I worked with my father, I could only earn 20 yuan a day. At this rate, I would soon become an enviable 10,000 yuan household. No wonder Xieshuyan always looked down on me. In the past, my vision was limited to that remote village, and I was always proud of being stable. Wasn't I exactly the good-for-nothing in her mouth? In July, Mother sent me a letter through someone. The letter said that Xieshuyan had a premature birth and gave birth to a son. Mother praised that child to the skies in the letter, as if he were really her own grandson. Mother also advised me in the letter that since I had left Uncle Chi's construction team, I might as well go home, continue to work for father, and also go back to take care of the child by the way. She also said that even if the child wasn't my biological one, over time, the child would naturally get close to me and be grateful to me. After reading the letter, I just sneered. In my previous life, wasn't I good enough to Lin Yin? People always said that they would take care of their grandchildren rather than their children, but Lin Yin was the one I carried and raised since he was a child. When he just learned to walk, I let him ride on my neck all day long and was even laughed at by others. Since he started school, I picked him up and dropped him off every day. Whatever he wanted, I tried my best to satisfy him. Even when he got married and started his own career, I still gave him pocket money all the time. I was just afraid that he would be looked down upon like I was when I was young, because he had no money. But what was the result? When did he find out that I wasn't his biological father? And why could he call that man dad so affectionately? I worked hard for most of my life, only to raise an ungrateful wretch. In the following years, I never went home. I really didn't want to face that disgusting woman and her bastard. Until one day, I received a call from home saying that mother was critically ill. I was extremely worried and simply packed my luggage and immediately returned to the village. But when I got home, I found mother sitting in the main hall, safe and sound. While I felt relieved, I was also filled with anger. I questioned mother why she had lied to me to get me back. Mother grabbed my ear and scolded. "You heartless thing. You left as soon as you wanted. Do you only come back when your mother is dead?" I helplessly begged mother for mercy and then changed the topic to ask where father had gone. Mother told me that father had gone to take his grandson to school. He went out early and came back late every day, just like a model grandfather. I was a bit confused. Why did father always suppress and scold his own son, but be so kind to a child with no blood relationship? Until after dinner at night, father sat with his legs crossed and, as usual, ordered me to take Lin Yin to the city to study. Then I understood. It turned out that he had always been thinking about what teacher Xia had promised him, to make him a city person. Even though I had already established myself in Jiangqing, he never thought of relying on me to enter the city. Indeed, in his heart, I was always that good for nothing. I directly refused father's request and told him that I would return to the city the next day. That night, I still slept on the makeshift bed on the ground, but nothing happened that night. Probably because Xieshuyan had already given birth to Lin Yin, and having a son made her content. By the way, her son was still named Lin Yin in this life. I suddenly became very curious. How much charm did that man have to make Xieshuyan so infatuated with him? In the dark and quiet room, I couldn't help but ask Xieshuyan this question. Just when I thought she had fallen asleep, a soft yet firm voice came from the bed. "Only he understands." May sneered and didn't ask any further. A so-called talented woman with noble character like her is indeed someone that a low-class person like me can't aspire to. Early the next morning, I returned to the city. That home, except for my mother whom I was a bit worried about, had nothing else worthy of my nostalgia. Over these years, my business has been growing larger and larger. I have opened dozens of waste recycling stations. I have basically contracted the landfills in the south of the city. The amount of money in my hands is so large that I can't even imagine it myself. However, I dare not tell anyone my true situation now, no matter who asks. I say I'm working for a big boss. One day, I had just brought back a truckload of waste from the outside and started sorting it, sweating all over. At this moment, I suddenly felt a shadow in front of me. I looked up and was shocked to see Xieshuyan. She was carrying big and small bags and holding that brat by the hand. Xieshuyan also recognized me. She frowned and looked around the environment, then pulled Lin Yin's hand and said, "Yin, call dad." Lin Yin covered his nose and backed away, starting to cry loudly. "I want to go home. I want to go home. What are you doing here?" I was very annoyed in my heart. Why couldn't I get rid of these two people? Xieshuyan noticed my impatience and seemed a bit flustered. She probably thought that since I had been sending money back all these years, I should have already forgiven her. Jian is about to start school soon. The educational conditions in the city are much better than those in the village, she explained. I sneered and asked, "Then what does that have to do with me?" Her eyes instantly turned red, her mouth twitched, and she couldn't say a word for a long time. Lin Yin was crying loudly beside her. Attracting the attention of the neighbors, they all craned their necks to look. I helplessly made way and let them into the house. After all, it wasn't very appropriate to send them back at this time. The house was filled with all kinds of sundries, exuding a peculiar stench. From the moment she entered the door, Xie Shuyun had been frowning, but I pretended not to notice. I told Xie Shuyun that it was inconvenient for them to live here and asked her to leave as soon as possible. But she showed no sign of leaving. Instead, she took her son and took the initiative to start cleaning. She tidied up the housework and no longer showed a look of disgust every time I came back from hauling goods. I could eat warm meals. As time passed, I no longer mentioned asking them to leave. I might as well consider her a free nanny. It's better than me often being so busy that I forget to eat and going hungry. Lin Yan also gradually calmed down. Children are often more perceptive. He probably sensed that I didn't like him. So he always tried every means to please me. As soon as I got home, he immediately poured water for me and imitated me to classify the waste. Sometimes when I was in a good mood, I would also buy some food and toys and bring them back. Lin Yan became more and more enthusiastic towards me. Xie Shuyun was naturally happy to see the improvement in our relationship. The neighbors all envied me for having a sensible son and a virtuous wife. I just pretended to be simple-minded and smiled foolishly. Surprisingly, acting stupid really worked. Ordinary people all liked to sell waste to me, thinking that I wouldn't cheat them. Speaking of which, I've made a lot of money these years, but I'm not a person with strong material desires. There's no place where I need to spend a large amount of money. Just that making money now can bring me a sense of satisfaction, making me want to earn more money. On an ordinary day, Xie Shuyun suddenly disappeared. She took her son and vanished from my life just like that. I didn't look for them. Let it be hope I never see them again. I'm not a great person, but I'm not a bad person either. Since being reborn, I've been trying hard to avoid repeating the mistakes of my previous life. I just want to enjoy this new life to the fullest. When I was 35 years old, I met a shrewd and capable woman. She was also in the waste recycling business. At first, I just noticed that the business of several stores had declined significantly. After investigation, I found out that it was the doing of a woman. After dealing with her several times, I had to admit that I was attracted to her. She wasn't a beauty in the traditional sense. Instead, due to long-term hard work outside, her skin was dark, and she looked extremely capable. She was a strong woman with a powerful aura. With my efforts in pursuit, she finally agreed to be with me. We didn't hold a grand wedding, just got a marriage certificate. We simply cooked a few dishes, invited 4 or 5 friends, and had a meal together. With her help, my business became more and more prosperous. I have to say that sometimes I'm not as decisive and daring as she is. Over these years, I still haven't gone home. I just called my mother and told her that Xie Shuyun had left with the child. I heard that father smashed a set of dishes at home. His dream of becoming a city person was thus shattered. After marriage, Ahua once suggested going back to visit my parents, but I stopped. Her feelings can't be forced. I don't have the confidence to change father's view of Meso. It's better to stay away from him. Later, father had a stroke and could only lie in a chair all day, staring blankly ahead. I took Ahua and Xiaoyan to visit him once. When he saw me, saliva kept flowing from the corner of his mouth, and he mumbled something indistinctly. But I couldn't understand it. Ali wondered if he ever regretted pushing his own son further and further away. But with his overbearing nature throughout his life, it's highly unlikely that he would admit his mistakes. Oh, by the way, Xiaoyan is my biological daughter. When she was born, she was like a little swallow crying for food. That appearance instantly melted my heart. Watching Xiaoyan grow from toddling to babbling, every stage of her growth made me immersed in great happiness. Occasionally, the scenes of accompanying Lin Yan's growth in the previous life would unconsciously emerge in my mind. But I would always shake my head and forcefully drive away those distressing memories. Why think about those things and add to my nausea? This year, I established a construction company. I bought several plots of land in the urban area and started to build commercial housing. The scale of my industry is growing day by day, and the assets under my name are so numerous that I'm too lazy to count them carefully. When the amount of money earned reaches a certain level, one will suddenly realize that money is just a bunch of cold numbers. After Xiaoyan started school, Ahua quit her job and stayed at home to take care of the household just so that when Xiaoyan and I came home, we could eat hot meals. Xiaoyan was also very competitive. She was admitted to one of the most prestigious middle schools in the city with excellent grades. To ensure she could have enough rest, I bought a house near the school. Our family moved in. Our days were plain and warm, simple, but also happy. However, God always seems to like to play tricks on people. Just when I thought I could be happy like this forever, Xiaoyan encountered campus bullying. One day, Xiaoyan, dirty all over with blood oozing from the corner of her mouth, ran home crying. She stubbornly refused to go to school anymore. My heart ached unbearably, and I couldn't bear to press her for details. I stormed directly to the school, found the principal, and demanded a reasonable explanation from him. Previously, without Xiaoyan's knowledge, I had donated a large sum of money to this school, hoping that the teachers would take more care of her. The principal dared not be negligent. However, unexpectedly, it was precisely the special treatment given by the teachers that triggered the jealousy and dissatisfaction of some students. Adolescent children, once malice spreads wantonly, and without measure. They first isolated Xiaoyan, and seeing that she was unmoved, they intensified their actions. Eventually, they even found thugs from outside the school to beat her. Fortunately, Xiaoyan didn't suffer more serious humiliation. I immediately called the police and requested that the police must find the perpetrators. During the process of handling this matter, I unexpectedly saw Lin Yan. Now, he had actually become a good for-nothing hooligan. Thinking back, with my insistence, he managed to finish school and even got into an ordinary university. How could he have degenerated to such an extent in this life? When he saw me, he didn't seem to recognize me. He just slouched casually against the wall, remaining silent no matter how the police educated him soon. Xie Shuyun rushed to the police station. Of course, she recognized me at a glance and immediately dropped to her knees in front of me. She pleaded bitterly with me to withdraw the case and not let her son have a criminal record. The woman in front of me had long lost her former nobility and elegance. The sharpened-on grindstone of years and life had made her indistinguishable from an ordinary middle-aged woman. Her figure had gone out of shape, and her back had been bent by reality. Seeing that I was unmoved, she started scolding Lin Yan loudly, completely ignoring the keep quiet sign on the wall. Eventually, I still chose to withdraw the lawsuit. Looking at Lin Yan's impatient face, ignoring Xie Shuyun, I thought to myself, perhaps this was fate. Xie Shuyun had finally received her due retribution. I wonder what Xie Shuyun said to Lin Yan when she got back. Lin Yan actually started harassing Xiao Yan. He spread the word everywhere that Xiao Yan was under his protection. Xiao Yan was extremely annoyed and came home to complain to me. Never expected him to be so shameless. On second thought, I should have expected his true nature to be unchangeable. In the previous life, in order to attach himself to that rich father, he discarded me like an old shoe. In this life, after learning that I was rich, he had the nerve to come looking for me. Probably not getting any benefits from Xiao Yan, he actually followed me to my company. He lied to the receptionist, claiming to be my illegitimate son and coming to find his father. The receptionist, a naive graduate, actually believed him and let him in. He swaggered into my office and sat in the boss's chair, crossing his legs. His arrogant and complacent appearance was disgusting. When I returned to the office after a meeting and saw this scene, I immediately called the police and asked the police to notify his family. Hearing that I called the police, he immediately flew into a rage and rushed over to curse at me. He called me a wife, abandoner and child, deserter, unworthy of being a father, and threatened to sue me for years of child support. The employees of the company were whispering and pointing at me. It seemed that they couldn't believe that I, who had always projected an image of a happy family, could be exposed to such a scandal. I calmly waited for the police to arrive and, in front of everyone, questioned Xie Shuyun. Did you tell him that I'm his biological father? Her face instantly turned deathly pale, but she remained silent. Lin Yan held up his ID and shouted beside him. Open your eyes and look. My name is Lin Yan, the same surname as you. My mother brought me up with great hardship, yet you formed another family outside. How can you treat us be fairly my mother? Then tell me, who is the man in the photo with you in the pendant around your neck? I continued to press. Xie Shuyun's face changed drastically, and she subconsciously took 2 steps back. She never imagined that the secret in the pendant she had always worn close to her body would be known to me. When I went to your house to propose marriage, your mother advised you to marry me quickly to avoid showing your pregnancy, right? I refused this marriage, and your father personally came to my house, tempting my father with the chance to return to the city and forcing me to marry. You did this happen? To maintain the face of your CF family. You came to my house alone without my ever touching you. You gave birth to a son prematurely, right? Xie Shuyun, I have done more than enough. How long are you going to humiliate me? My series of questions caught her off guard. With tears in her eyes, she stumbled and pulled Lin Yan away from the scene. I apologized to the police officer who came to the scene, dispersed the on-looking employees. I took a deep look at the pale-faced receptionist and left the company. After that, I hired a private detective to learn about Xie Shuyun's living conditions. Over the years after she left with Lin Yan, she went to look for her biological parents, but learned that teacher Xie and his wife had gone to another province as early as when the educated youth returned to the city, and no one could contact them. Perhaps to completely get rid of the stains of the past, they even abandoned their own biological daughter. Human nature is truly complex. There are parents like teacher Xie and his wife, who are extremely concerned about face. There are also fathers like my dad, who are domineering and dictatorial, and mothers like Xie Shuyun, who dote on their sons without restraint. When I got home and saw Xiao Yan concentrating on her studies, I couldn't help but show a gratified smile. Of course, there are also people in this world who cherish family affection like me. Don't know if it's because of my rebirth that some unknown changes have occurred. Strangely enough, over the years, Xie Shuyun's first love never appeared in her life. She had been raising her son as a single mother once. She didn't do any household chores and was immersed in reading, writing, and painting all day long. In the previous life, I took care of her meticulously. There was even a photo of her circulating on the internet, praised by netizens as a beauty who defies the passage of time. But now, she had become an ordinary housewife struggling for a living, and was even disliked by the son she had raised with her own hands. After leaving my company, she was pushed to the ground by Lin Yan and injured her coccyx. She limped home only to find her house in a mess. Lin Yan had taken her money and run away. She muttered a few curses, not taking it too seriously. She thought Lin Yan would be back soon. But who could have expected that later? Lin Yan was caught on the spot for drug use during a drug control crackdown, and it seemed that he was also involved in drug trafficking. When Xie Shuyun learned of the news, she rushed to the detention center like crazy to question Lin Yan, but she heard Lin Yan shout with disgust, "You're not worthy of being my mother." You insisted on giving birth to me. Did you ever ask for my opinion? You were just satisfying your own desires. Because of your pitiful love, you ruined me. I hate you. After hearing this, Xie Shuyun stumbled out of the detention center. She just couldn't figure out why the son she had treated sincerely hated her so much. In this life, she seemed to have lived a joke. After returning home, she locked the door and never came out again. It was not until the neighbors smelled the bad smell and called the police that they found she had long committed suicide by cutting her wrists at home. After learning this news, I was silent for a long time. Whose fault was it? Soon, I put this matter out of my mind. Xiao Yan was about to take the high school entrance examination. At the moment, all my thoughts were on her. She deserved my whole-hearted dedication. I went to the school to pick up Xiao Yan. When I got home, I saw that Ahua had prepared a sumptuous meal and greeted her with a big smile.